Welcome back, Heat Seekers. Week 1 is almost in the books, and you are probably asking yourself, who's to grab on the waiver wire? We got news of a Dak Prescott injury. We've got scares with Najee Harris. Looks to be not serious, but we're here to help you. We got some guys to grab on your waiver wire. With that being said, I am joined by my favorite Roto Heat. Let's get to it. We are going to talk about the backup to Najee Harris. We're going to talk Jaylen Warren. Not owned very much. What do you think about this? Do you think if Najee's out, Warren gives you a really good chance at RB2, RB3? What do you think with something like that?
I honestly have no idea what to expect out of Jaylen Warren if he does get in there and has to start in place of Najee Harris. When we look at Najee Harris so far in his career, running the ball, he hasn't been very efficient. And he has caught a lot of passes that have helped his fantasy production. How does that translate? We've got a new quarterback. We've got basically a new offense running now that Ben Roethlisberger is not there. So I don't know what to expect, but I do know that we want a running back in Pittsburgh if we have the opportunity to get one cheap. We just have to hope that he's not terrible.
And he came in when Najee went out, 3 carries, 7 yards, got a target in the passing game, didn't catch it. But we know that he's probably the next man up if things go awry. And that is promising. Look at the ownership numbers. Nobody's owning them right now in basically any format you're in, so you can grab them, stash them, and see what happens. I don't hate doing this move and looking preemptively because it's week 1 and Najee's already hurting. That could mean that he's going to need to get some rest, maybe split some carries. Maybe he doesn't get the same type of workload. It wouldn't surprise me if Warren gets in the game a little bit more to help offset that as well.
Yeah, and with a sore Lisfranc, I don't know how to clarify Najee's Lisfranc issue from before the season even started. But with that going on, there's just a higher likelihood of him getting injured if there's already an issue there. So I'm not super excited about it, but if you have a bench spot and you can afford to wait on somebody, then I could see that taking him a week or 2 early maybe. I'm not going out of my way if there's other options.
Yeah, this is the bottom of our list. So we're giving you 10 this week. This would be the last of it if you really needed something. After that, we've got Greg Dorch, wide receiver from the Cardinals. Had a surprising productive stat line this week. 9 targets, 7 catches, 63 yards, but is owned nowhere. And nobody was expecting him. You have Marquise Brown, you've got Rondale Moore, you've got Ertz, and you've got all these options. Plus, you got passing game out of the backfield with Connor. You didn't see this one coming, and nobody did, obviously. So do you anticipate them keeping something like this up? And knowing that DeAndre is coming back in, 5 games now, is this a short-term thing in your mind, or do you feel like they maybe have something going here with Dorch in this passing game?
I actually thought Dorch might be a decent play this week because of Rondale being out. What happens when Rondale's back and DeAndre's back? I don't know. But right now, even if Rondale is back, Dorch might get targets because, one, they couldn't stop anything on defense. So it looks like they're going to have to throw a ton this year. And obviously that was KC and it was Patrick Mahomes on the other side. If we didn't see that type of usage out of Rondale Moore last year. So Dorch is coming in. And if he's going to be more productive than Rondale's been, there's no saying that he can't be the third. But people thought it was going to be Andy Isabella. And, Dorch plays out of the slot, though, and with Moore out, then it fit into his play style and to be more involved. So it's hard to tell exactly what's going to happen. But if he can be productive while Moore's out, then who knows what his usage could be for the remainder of the season.
Absolutely. All right, so let's jump up to our next guy. Let's talk Gerald Everett, tight end from the Chargers. This is a guy who's been on fantasy radars, been off fantasy radars. He was productive this week. He was targeted 4 times, caught 3 of those for 54 and a touchdown. Not bad production out of your tight end position, and obviously you can tell by the ownership numbers, still everything's under 45%. So if you need tight end help, maybe you had a Dalton Schultz with the Dak Prescott injury or some of these other tight ends that have not been super productive in week 1, and maybe you want to grab somebody else. Everett's not a bad play. He's been productive at points in his career. And if the Chargers are really going to continue to use him and give him somewhere in the 3 to 5 targets a game, there can be some production to be had. What do you think about Everett?
Everett, I think, is super talented. He's been in offenses that utilize the outside heavily and showed sparks in big games from here and there. But I think in this offense, like, he was one of those tight ends that I was on all off season saying this is a guy to grab late in drafts, because if he gets utilized heavily in this offense, there's going to be a lot of scoring potential. That offense, that team, Herbert just looks amazing. I like that situation a lot at tight end. So if you don't have that solidified top tier guy, this is a guy to look at.
Well, and his running mate over there. So next up, we want to talk DeAndre Carter. This was a little bit of a surprise as well, I think, to some, because nobody owns him, but he got targeted similar. 4 targets, caught 3 for 64 and a touchdown this week. And things were a little quieter for Keenan Allen. But this offense, does this make you believe that there's maybe potential for it to support 4 passing game target options with 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and maybe something out of the backfield? What's your take on Carter? Because he's had some stints with Washington where he had a little bit of run in the fantasy community, but not a whole lot here.
Keenan Allen got hurt, so that helps Carter out a little bit when he leaves the game, and then Carter gets more run in the slot. But this offense is going to throw a lot, and in that division, they're going to have to throw a lot, and they're going to have to use. There was 4 first half. There was 4 tight ends that were targeted, and a tight end I never even heard of caught the first touchdown. So they're going to use a lot of options. But I think DeAndre Carter, it matters more on what's going to happen with Keenan Allen's injury, because I don't think anybody outside of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are going to be consistent at wide receiver, but we're going to see big games like this out of these secondary options on just random weeks.
And we have to, and to your point about the Keenan Allen injury, I know as of now, the news was a hamstring, and they play on Thursday night, so he may or may not make it. So if you do need a wide receiver to backfill, there's something there, because there's plenty of passing game, plenty of targets in the passing game to go around.
And who do they play Thursday?
So the Chiefs.
If they play the Chiefs, then I would be fine with putting Carter in my lineup if Keenan Allen misses, because there's going to be plenty of
they play the Chiefs Thursday at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty of targets to go around in that game. I wouldn't mind having Carter. I like Carter. I like the talent. I picked him up in Dynasty everywhere last year because he showed some stuff, but it's just going to be inconsistent with everybody healthy.
Yeah. All right. So next up, a surprise, but a guy that we all know in the fantasy community, OJ Howard, newly signed to the Texans just in the last week. When Buffalo cut him, he went and signed with the Texans. He had a massive game. He caught, what was his final stat line? 2 targets, 2 catches, 38 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's some efficient targets and touchdown production from OJ Howard. And when you looked at the way the Texans ran this offense, Brevin Jordan and OJ Howard both were out there. They were both getting targets. Howard showed what he could do. I mean, that red zone, his red zone opportunities, he made the most of it. And they really weren't necessarily red zone options, because this was 38 yards. So it wasn't like within the 20s each time. So OJ Howard is a guy that I feel comfortable targeting and adding to my team, because they're going to keep using him. You see the talent there, and you saw the production this week. What do you think about Howard?
I'm not as confident as you that they're going to continue using him. We've seen this from times from OJ Howard. We could say the same thing about Gerald Everett, though, with the Chargers, but I trust the Chargers offense. I don't trust the Texans offense yet. I do Davis Mills way more than I did when he came out.
Oh, yeah.
He has shown a lot, I think, in his first season in one game. But he definitely is at tight end. We know how tight end is, and it's going to matter if they're going to score touchdowns. And if he's going to be a guy that's going to get a lot of work, then he could be a valuable tight end asset. But this is a guy that literally couldn't stick with Tampa Bay, who's got Cameron Brate running as their tight end one. And I've never been a big Dawson Knox fan, and he couldn't even make the Bills roster. Is this just going to be the perfect storm for him, where he finally does what everybody expected since he got drafted? I'm not 100% certain, but he's definitely worth an ad.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the way that the targets were spread around, I mean, obviously Brandon Cooks was heads and tails above everybody. And then Rex Burkhead had 5 out of the backfield. And then OJ Howard and Nico both had 2. When you look at the way this team was rolling things out, and OJ Howard might be one of their top options. Brevin Jordan also had a catch, but wasn't targeted a ton. It's what is this team doing with these different pieces? I think Mills has made a good step forward. They need a running game to help support this, which we clearly saw they didn't have a strong running game. Burkhead got you 40. Other than that, Dameon Pierce, I won't say that it is short on it to play Dameon Pierce. That might have been bad on me, but he just didn't get nearly as involved and wasn't super productive when he was involved. So it'll be interesting to see how this team plays. It looks like they're going to have to pass to try to stay in some of these games, though.
And that was a surprise. And Rex Burkhead should probably be on this list too.
It doesn't have high ownership, that's for sure.
But it was a surprise that Pierce didn't get more run because Houston was leading for most of the game. And I expected them to lean on the run if they got the lead. That wasn't the game script that I anticipated happening. So when I didn't like Dameon Pierce as a starter, it was more because of the Colts defense. And I figured the Colts would be up and Houston would be just airing it out. And that was not at all what happened in that game.
Slightly different. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, OJ Howard, if he does, I mean, he could. We're talking about a guy that was highly touted coming out, never really clicked for him, but maybe this is the spot where it does. It's just, we've seen like 4 of these games in his career and every other game has just been absolutely nothing. You know, where Gerald Everett, we've seen games like today way more frequently than we have from OJ Howard.
Oh, for sure. I'm with you on that one. All right. So next up, Donovan Peoples-Jones from the Browns. It was a good game for him. He had 11 targets, 6 catches, 60 yards. You know, not bad when Jacoby Brissett is your quarterback. I was really pleasantly surprised when going back and checking things out for him. He doesn't have a lot of ownership. So if you, again, this is another one, if you need some wide receiver help, this guy's probably not somebody, you know, unless, and this depends on your league scoring. If it's PPR, that's a solid stat line. If you're getting 1 plus every 10 yards, then he got you 12 points today. Great. If your scoring is a little different, you know, maybe he's a depth guy and you're just keeping him to see what happens. But I feel as though, and I get the feeling that this team will continue to use him heavily in the passing game because he's continued to develop and continue to develop and continue to develop, and he looks good. So what do you think about DPJ? Is he somebody that you feel like is going to keep getting this kind of run where you're going to see, you know, 6 to 10 targets, maybe 11?
Yeah, I think he'll be more in the 6 to 8 range on a weekly basis. I think it's him and Amari Cooper, right? And then everybody else is going to share what's ever left until David Bell maybe earns a larger role as his rookie season goes on. But if you can get DPJ now and then he does okay until Watson gets back, he could be huge for the last few weeks and in the playoffs because his skill set really matches more of what we're going to expect from Watson, right? And that goes for him and Amari Cooper. Like Amari Cooper, you can kind of let rot for a few weeks. And then when we get to like week 6, 7, target him in trades and stuff and try to get him from your league mates before Mr. Watson comes back. But yeah, I think they're going to have to. It's going to be concentrated target tree with him and Cooper, and then everybody else kind of splitting what's left. And is it going to be great? No, but I'm sure he's going to have a couple blow up weeks as well.
Yep. I agree. All right. Next up, Dontrell Hilliard. We saw him have a little bit of run with those Browns, but now he's with the Tennessee Titans. You didn't see him get a ton of action out of the backfield running the ball. 2 carries, 8 yards, but it was the receiving out of the backfield where this guy did his damage. 4 targets, 3 catches, 61 yards, 2 touchdowns. So very, very strong, productive line this week if you used him at all as a running back, which I doubt most did because the ownership is extremely low. Derrick Henry did not look necessarily like Derrick Henry. I mean, you're going to see the big hit where I can't think of the linebacker, but he just laid him out.
You don't see that happen very often to Derrick Henry.
No. So is this a sign of things to come? Who knows? But Dontrell Hilliard has potential to get some value out of the backfield. I mean, especially in the receiving game, because look at the way Tannehill and those receivers did not look on the same page. He's going to need to check it down. What do you think about Hilliard? How do you feel?
Hilliard was good in the Tennessee offense last year when Henry was out. He was the most efficient running back from a true yards per carry perspective. in the NFL. He didn't get the love that Deonta Foreman got in that offense, but Hilliard was good running the ball and receiving. And we've talked about Henry. They're not going to be able to give him that many touches forever. He is losing efficiency fast, and it's only getting worse. And Hilliard is going to be involved out of that backfield, and that work only explodes if Henry were to miss some time. I think this is a guy that should be rostered in most leagues. Like, there's not many backup running backs that are in as good of a spot because they either don't get the pass work in PPR leagues, or they're not going to get a lot of the running work. And I think he's going to get a good combination of both and be a guy that is, he's not going to be a workhorse. He's not going to get you 20 carries, but he's probably going to get you 12 to 14 carries and could catch 6 balls out of the backfield on any given week. That's valuable. And he could have some standalone value when bye weeks start rolling around, as we've seen today with the receptions and the 2 touchdowns. I like Dontrell Hilliard a lot in this offense with the way it's all set up right now.
Absolutely. Very intriguing running back potential. Next up is a guy that we've talked about over the years here, Roto, that we liked coming out. It looks like he has a good rapport with Lamar. It went well today for him. 4 targets, 4 catches, 54 yards, 2 touchdowns. This team needs an alpha receiver. Obviously, everyone expected it to be Rashad Bateman. Devin Duvernay is a Steve Smith light. I mean, just aggressive. He attacks at the point of the catch, is a good, solid receiver that needed time to develop. And he may be at that point where he's developed enough to where he's giving you some weekly consideration. I like him. I'm intrigued by him. I definitely I have him on rosters mostly. What are you doing with Devin Duvernay? How do you feel about him?
I mean, I think he's fine, but he's not the alpha in this offense. It is Rashad Bateman. But Rashad Bateman had Sauce Gardner today. And Sauce Gardner is kind of good.
He went pretty high in the draft for a reason.
Sauce Gardner hasn't given up a touchdown since he graduated high school. He's kind of good. He didn't even get targeted in the preseason. Like, he had a bad matchup today, and Sauce Gardner is going to be a guy that shuts down a lot of NFL receivers. And Bateman didn't even have a bad day, right? I think he ended up with like 68 yards or something like that. I don't remember the exact line. Started off slow, but he got his yards in. It's just that Duvernay got the touchdowns, and that's not going to happen frequently, right? Because Mark Andrews didn't get them today, and Bateman's going to get his. And I think guys like Isaiah Likely are going to get some, and the running backs are all out, right? They're playing Mike Davis and Kenyon Drake at running back. That's not going to be the season long thing. So it's going to be it's going to be tough, but I do think that he is going to be a potential flex play once we hit bye weeks and stuff. I don't know that you're going to throw him in until we get to that point in leagues, though.
And hopefully you don't have to, because if you take those touchdowns away, it's 4 for 54. Not great,
it's an all right day.
Yeah, but nothing terrible.
Touchdowns are they're not sticky week to week. You know, he might have 2 the rest of the season.
Yeah,
like that's just we see it a million times.
Another guy that really should be rostered a whole lot more than he is, just because of how much San Francisco uses 800 running backs, Jeff Wilson. As you can tell, everything's below 20%. I mean, he should be available in your league format. This is a guy that, Elijah Mitchell went out in the Chicago game, as I'm sure you saw. I know here in Fort Wayne, I was watching that game, at least until I flipped back and forth between that and Houston. Wilson looks like the next man up when Elijah Mitchell goes out, right? And I know everyone's excited about Tyrion Davis-Price and Mason and some of these guys, but Wilson's been in the system. He knows what to do. He knows assignments. How do you feel about Wilson? Is he a guy that you feel like you can trust if Mitchell goes down?
Yeah, I think he's proven it throughout the past 2-3 seasons, right? Every time he's got an opportunity, he has produced. Don't quote me on that. Maybe there's a game log or 2 in there where he
those comments are coming hot.
But Jeff Wilson has been, every running back in this offense has really been productive when given the opportunity, right? And today was a weird game for even like Mitchell, because that whole field was a mess. Both offenses were sloppy. I mean, a professional field should never look like that, by the way. And that's why
No.
Chicago needs to move out of Soldier Field, because that was just ridiculous. But Jeff Wilson should have been rostered in way more leagues before, because Elijah Mitchell hasn't shown that he can stay on the field consistently in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
No 49ers running back over the past 6 years has shown that they can stay on the field. And Jeff Wilson is the number 2. Now, these other guys that have been kind of, hyped up, or we've even dropped videos on TDP and Mason, but those are guys that are probably going to get an opportunity at some point this year, but it's going to be because Elijah Mitchell misses time, and then they're pushed into this number 2 running back role. And then if
Jeff Wilson gets hurt,
then they, that's how this running back stable has worked for 49ers. And there's been multiple years. There's been like 3 or 4 running backs that have gotten action at points of the season every season for the past like 3 or 4 seasons. So I think Wilson should be added. He's one of the few on here that if he's available in your league, like almost every team has a player they could drop to add Wilson to that roster, even if Mitchell's going to be in next week, because Mitchell's probably going to miss a couple games at some point. Wilson could eventually have standalone value. I think that he's a guy that should be rostered in most spots just because of the way that system works and health.
Absolutely. All right. So, Robbie Anderson. So this is a guy that has been up and down in fantasy for most of his career, mostly due to who was throwing him the ball. Let's be honest here. He hasn't had great quarterback play. And
I mean, most of it's been Darnold.
Yeah, and most of it's been Sam Darnold, unfortunately. Him and Baker seem to be on the same page. He got targeted a ton. He finished off with, what was it?
5 for 102.
Yeah, 5. So 8 targets, 5 catches, 102 yards, and a touchdown. So solid stat line. Definitely something that you feel pretty good about. You can tell ownership is low on most platforms except for Sleeper. And so we wanted to make sure we put him in here because Yahoo and ESPN ownership, I mean, really should be much higher than this, even for a guy in an offense that has a lot of questions like Carolina's has over the last few years. There should be higher ownership here. How do you feel about Robbie Anderson?
Robbie Anderson, I've loved the talent forever, but he's been in those situations where he hasn't had a good quarterback throwing him the ball forever. I mean, when you start your career with the Jets and then you move to the Panthers, who have had 8 quarterbacks in 3 years, it's not a very good situation. Now, he did struggle last year, right? He was getting targets last year. And I don't know why ownership dropped so low going into 2022, because we didn't expect somebody else to take targets from him, right? It's him and DJ Moore. And that was the worst that Robbie Anderson has ever played himself, right? Not just stats wise, but just he had some drop issues last year. He's a super talented wide receiver. He's in an offense that should improve as the season goes on, as Baker and him and DJ Moore get more acclimated. We're going to see good play by Robbie Anderson this year. Now, is he a guy that you're going to put in your lineup some weeks and then he throws up a dud and frustrates you? That's Robbie Anderson. But Robbie Anderson is also the guy that could get you 8 catches for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns on a given week. But I do think he's going to be fairly consistent in the 8 to 12 point range, where he doesn't kill your lineup, but have the opportunity for 25-point weeks on any given week.
Absolutely. All right, folks. So that is it. There's our 10. If you guys have players that you're considering and you need help, drop them in the comments below. Go over to rotoheat.com and join our Discord. Get your questions answered there. There may be other names that we didn't include on this list or players that you're thinking about. Let's talk about them. We definitely want to help you out. Week 1 is nearly in the book, so we'll be coming back on the weekly to help you out here as the season progresses. We will give you new guys each week. If you need us, you know where to find us. Everything runs through rotoheat.com. Go there. Don't forget, subscribe, do all the things you do. Share this video. Tell everybody about it. We do appreciate it as always. We'll see you next week.